Well, we're here with Bill, Merchant Marine at the convention here in Baltimore. And Bill, tell us your name.
My name is Bill Balabanow. That's a hard name. It's B like boy, Alabanow, pronounced Balabanow.
All righty. And how many conventions have you been at so far?
I just don't remember, about 6 or 8 of them.
6 or 8.
Yeah.
And do you meet different people every time you come? Different Merchant Marines?
Well, we about half and half. Half we know from before, and half are new.
Okay.
And then there's a lot of guests that arrive that are not merchant mariners.
Okay. Now let me ask you this: how old are you?
I'm 95 years old.
95, and you are a World War II veteran. Am I correct?
World War II, Korea, and Vietnam.
I'll be darned.
Yep.
So let's talk about your beginnings.
Yes,
Let's
sir.
talk about when you first decided to go into the Merchant Marine and what possessed you to go into the Merchant Marine.
Yes, sir. 1944, I went in, but the war started in 41, and the people were much more patriotic than they are now. We wanted to go and help. So I quit school, high school, and tried to go into the service. And I was rejected by all the branches of the service. And I tried for about 2 years to get into the military. When I finally found out about the Merchant Marine, I didn't know what the Merchant Marine was, but it sounded like it was military. So that suited me greatly. And I joined the Merchant Marine in 1944 and went to boot camp in Sheepshead Bay, New York. While we were in Sheepshead Bay, New York, boot camp, there was a great demand for radio officers. And so we took an aptitude test, and I qualified for radio school. Then we spent another 6 months at radio school before we shipped out.
And what was your first date that you shipped?
Was on Shinney, Pennsylvania. It was an old World War I freighter that was built in Hog Island, which is right down the road from here. We went on that ship in a convoy over to the Mediterranean, through the Straits, and then up to France, where we discharged Army cargo.
And what else did you bring anything back?
Yes, sir. At that time, they were returning all damaged equipment, that is military.
Mm-hmm.
And so we brought back a load of damaged equipment. We brought that back to New York.
Okay.
From there, we went down to Puerto Rico, to Guantanamo Bay, with a load of military stuff. And then we came back, and I wanted to go home. So at that time, we didn't get vacation. You have to quit your ship in order to get a couple days off. Then I joined a T2 tanker, a brand new ship out of New York. That ship, we went down to Aruba and loaded up with aviation gas. But before we did that, we loaded the top flight deck of that tanker. They put a flight deck on there, which was the size of the ship's hold and everything. Mm-hmm. And they tied down fighter airplanes. So we had a top deck of fighter airplanes and a whole shipload of gasoline so they can run.
Let me ask you this: what kind of fighter planes were they? P-51s?
I don't recall. I don't recall. And we took that through the Panama Canal and went over to the Philippines and dropped off the fuel, and then we went to a little place. No, we went to Okinawa next.
I'll be darned.
And then we went to and finished off at Ulithi. Ulithi is in the Mariana chain,
Okay.
and that's a storage place for fuel oil for the military at that time, and we loaded off there, and then started back home.
Now let me ask you: were you in a convoy in that particular?
No, we were there by ourselves.
Well, did that seem a little dangerous to you? I mean, a lot of Japanese submarines are still out there.
Yeah, I was too young to really realize that. I mean, I'm on a ship now, and I'm happy.
You're an old salty Saul, huh?
But later on, you realize things were not exactly what they ought to be, and then you became a little bit frightened, apprehensive anyhow.
Now let me ask you. Now let's get back to the European theater. Is that the only trip that you made in the European theater?
During the war?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Now and then, the Pacific. Did you receive a medal for?
Yes, sir.
Being in both theaters.
Yes, and the Mediterranean.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
That you had the Atlantic, the Pacific, and the Mediterranean.
Okay. On your trip, on your convoy over to southern France through the Strait of Gibraltar, did anybody in your convoy hit?
There were ships that were hit with torpedoes, but most of them they didn't hit their target, and we only saw the two of them. I think it was 2 ships that got hit.
Okay.
Now I don't know if they went down right away, but the convoy went on without them. We weren't allowed to stick around for fear of a submarine coming along and topping us off.
Now, was there Navy personnel on your ships with
Yes, sir.
weapons?
At the time, there were guns had been put on. In the beginning of the war, we had no guns.
Correct.
On the ship. And shortly after the beginning of the war, they put guns on there, and they had a special Navy crew with the armed guards. That's all they did. They came on board the ship to help guard the ship.
Mm-hmm.
And part of our jobs, our training in boot camp, was learning how to shoot those guns, especially the anti-aircraft guns.
20 millimeter?
20 and 40, yeah,
Okay.
20 meter and 40s, yes. And we weren't allowed to do that theoretically, but if you see a bunch of your buddies on the decks hurting, it doesn't take much to pick up a gun.
Yeah. Now let me ask you a question. It's ironic that they said that you never seen combat, but yet you were helping loading the weapons and so on and so forth, and actually shooting the guns
Sometimes, yes.
Yes. So how did you feel about that when they said that you weren't in combat?
Oh, when I learned that we weren't military at the Merchant Marine, although we went to boot camp and was regimented.
Under the Coast Guard, right? The Coast
Well,
Guard,
it was at that time it was the Maritime Service.
Okay.
And later they disbanded that, and when we went to sea, we were under the Coast Guard.
Okay.
Now that was another touchy subject, because although all our orders and all our papers were taken care of by the Coast Guard, we were not Coast Guardmen. We were still a separate branch, and that's what caused a lot of the trouble, a lot of the confusion.
I see.
Uh-huh. So that's
And
what.
did you ever see torpedoes in the water?
Yes, you see torpedoes in the water. They when a convoy goes across, and if a submarine attack finds you, they will shoot there randomly, and a lot of them miss, and they go down. You're passing them and trying to maneuver around them, but you can see them coming and going, and occasionally you see them
Yeah.
meet their target.
Is there anything you'd like to, I mean, we there was over 9,000
Yes,
yeah, merchant marines that were perished during the
that is correct. I just don't know the number. I think 9,200 or something like that.
Yeah.
And that, incidentally, is not very well known, but our casualty rate was higher than any other branch of the service.
I'm glad you said that, because a lot of people don't know that.
They don't know that.
And hats off to the merchant marines, because without you guys, we would have never been supplied. Our men and women over there fighting over there, they would have never.
Well, that's the thing of it. People don't know that we were there during the invasions of all these islands, but they don't realize that this ammunition and so forth doesn't just pile up on the beach waiting for a war to start. You have to start the war and start fighting. Then we bring in the stuff.
Supplies.
Incidental toothbrushes, shoelaces.
You never think of that, right?
You never think of that. But when the military needs something, you go to the quartermaster. Where does he get it from? From the merchant marine.
Yeah, bringing it in.
Bringing it in.
Were you ever part of bringing any of the soldiers back?
No, but I'll tell you one thing. I still say that when I tell people I was a merchant marine, they say, "Oh yeah, my son was a marine," and I say, "Well, wait a minute, there's a difference." "Oh yeah, what is it?" I said, "Well, the Marines did the fighting, and we carried the Marines to the combat area, gave them enough supplies, and then took them home. So we were part of it."
Wow. Is there anything else you'd like?
Yeah, tell me a little bit about what you have in your collection.
Yeah.
Oh, the collection. Oh.
Just look at Emmett when you, just like you're talking to Emmett.
Oh, yes.
I'll say that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tell us about your collection, Bill.
Oh, I gathered up things all through my career, 30-odd years at sea, and I was very ardent advocate of the Merchant Marine, so I built a trailer to carry stuff in and decorated it with military Merchant Marine memorabilia, and I got a lot of stuff that I picked up at yard sales and things like that. Then just a few years ago, I got to a point where I realized that my family don't want that stuff, and what am I going to do with it? Well, I want the public to know about this kind of thing, so I contacted the group that's interviewing me right now. It's a museum down in North Carolina, and I'm displaying it at our convention. At the end of the convention, the men are going to take lock, stock, and barrel, and I hope sometime you get down there to see it.
You will. Now, tell us what you got. You got.
Well, I got two.
You talk about your medals and things like that.
I have all the medals that I awarded, which these fellows didn't see yet, and a lot of medals and ribbons that were given out by the government for the Atlantic, Pacific, the Mediterranean, Okinawa. It was the other war,
Korean,
Korean and
Vietnam.
Vietnam. I couldn't think of that.
Yeah.
I got that, and I have a medal for the liberation of the Philippines, victory medals.
Wow.
Then after the war, we were awarded many ribbons by various organizations that wanted to honor us, and this is all going with them. I have a lot of paperwork that I did research on that will probably come in very handy for them to use, for the museum to use as a fact-finding ports. I have a bunch of pictures that I have in frames that some of them are me, but most of them are pictures of documents that are no longer available. Some original 1944 licenses and things such as that I want the public to see it. I want the public to realize that Merchant Marine was a separate.
We at the Veterans History Museum of the Carolinas, I'll tell you what, we honor the Merchant Marines. Matter of fact, I was at a function and they didn't have a Merchant Marine flag up there. They had everyone. And I said, why don't you have a Merchant Marine flag? He said, we don't have one. I said, well, I have one. So I brought it to them and they put it up. And I want to make sure that the Merchant Marines, our museum, Ken and all of us, want to make sure the Merchant Marines are always recognized as combatants in the Second World
Yes.
War, not just delivering goods back and forth. You actually saw action.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I did not mention that I also gave speeches, and I would emphasize certain things like you're just saying, and we want the public. Well, after I give a speech, a lady comes up to me and say, "Gee, I never knew that."
Yeah, well, there's a lot of people that don't know that, and so we want to make sure they do know that
Well,
through interviews like this.
Okay, well, don't forget that Cape Hatteras is a graveyard of the Atlantic.
Well,
It is.
Admiral King started sending those boats out there one at a time,
Yeah.
and they were silhouetted right along the coast, and then U-boats were just sitting out there picking them off.
Yeah, they were, and the stores along the coast didn't want to turn their lights out.
Exactly.
It's bad for business.
Yes, it was.
I got a real quick question
Okay.
for the news. How does it feel that you're
Well, you're going to ask
No,
it.
look at me. Just
Okay.
look at me.
That was a wonderful feeling, and we emphasized that quite a bit. But the government made the laws, there are certain laws that I could quote, but it'd be too long, that say that the Merchant Marine have been recognized as veterans, combat veterans, and not the people after that and before that, the war, they are merchant mariners still. They've always been a merchant mariner, but not wartime veterans. And I might also mention that of all the branches, the Merchant Marine is the oldest. 2 days before the Army became
1775.
1775, yes. I just forget the date, July 12th or something
So the
like that.
Merchant Marines were first.
They were.
2 days later, the Army.
That's right.
That's really good.
Hey,
I didn't know that fact.
well, I probably can tell you a lot of things all day. That's why they say that two sailors to get together, man, you got stories. Yeah.
My father was in the Navy, and he died at 49, so I didn't get a chance to really talk to them
Right.
much.
Well, for a long time, I didn't admit that I was a merchant mariner. I never told anybody because,
From what? Why? Did you feel that it wasn't?
well, the stigma was that we were draft dodgers,
Yeah,
drunkens,
exactly.
right? And then not Paul Harvey, but two commentators of the time badmouthed
The Merchant Marine.
Merchant Marine, yeah, and people believed it. They got it in the newspapers, and they call it disinformation now. They spread lies that they knew
Is
were
that
not
fake news? Would that be under
fake news. Well, they have they call it a misinformation, whereas people hear something, repeat
And they
it,
believe it.
but they believe it.
Yeah.
But the other people are doing it on purpose for obvious reasons.
Well,
You can't call this fake news.
no.
Did you forget to turn it on?
Are you done?
I have to give him a hard time.
Are you
Yeah.
done
I
yet?
got a couple more questions.
Good, good.
So, you were getting ready before we started this fake news stuff. You were getting ready to say that you hid it. There was a stigma to being a merchant marine. Explain that a little bit. You were talking about the commentators and what was it that they said?
Well, as you don't know, because you weren't there, is that the merchant marine did have a bunch of bad apples, but most of them knew that they were going into war, and they went anyhow. But that wasn't, nobody realized that, and they didn't take that into consideration. I think I did tell you that I joined. We fought to get in to fight,
Yeah.
and but people didn't realize that, and parades would be held for Army and Navy, and even when the troop transports came home,
Yeah.
big
Merchant
hullabaloo.
Marines were on that too.
Yeah, hullabaloo about the Army and the Navy and this, but who brought them home?
The Merchant Marine.
Merchant Marine.
Now let me ask you, why didn't the Army, Navy, Marine, and Air take you on? Why? What was, you were too young, or what was the reason why they, when you tried to get into those
I had
services?
a formality called scoliosis. It's a curvature of the spine.
Okay.
But you got to remember also that there were many movie stars, famous people, that John Wayne,
Served.
and another guy was Falk, Falk, Falk. I forget, he had a very famous detective series going on television.
Okay.
He only had one eye.
But they took him.
They took him. The Army don't take him, but they took him because he wanted to be part of it. And there were hundreds of them that I just can't.
I mean, Peter Falk?
Peter Falk, yes, it was. You're right. Uh-huh.
I'll be darned.
One eye.
Yeah, he does. He always has that.
Yeah.
One eye.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right. I think one more question though.
Yes, sir.
Did any of your friends die? Did you know anybody that
No, I never heard of
victims?
any of my
Okay.
friends because,
Well, thank goodness for that.
Yeah.
yeah, I do. Yeah, thank you. And I thank the good Lord. And my mother, I'm sure, prayed quite a few prayers.
Let me tell you.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you want to. Well, how long did it take you to get across?
Well, it depends what kind of a ship you're on and where you're going.
Okay.
The ships that I were mostly on were slow. I mean,
How many knots? 12 knots? 10 knots?
well, the first one I was on was about 9 knots, and then the Liberty ships were about 10 knots, and then the tankers were about 12, 14 knots. Yeah, but then it's going to.
Would it take you 2 weeks to get over to the
Oh,
Pacific?
you're just getting started in 2 weeks.
It's just getting started. in 2 weeks. So what are you looking, a month to get
Yeah,
over? So
yeah.
you're a month on the water?
Many times.
You are a salty soul, aren't you?
I made one trip that was a year long.
Did you ever go fishing off the boat?
Wait a
Yeah,
minute,
we
wait a minute.
did.
I want to hear about this year-long trip. Tell me
Good.
about that.
Oh, that was not during the war. That was
Oh,
after the
okay.
war.
Oh, okay.
Just to emphasize how long the trips were. But that one was, we started out on the West Coast and went to Japan and then down to Hong Kong and so forth, around the Cape, up into the Suez Canal. No, we loaded our oil. We loaded before we the Suez Canal, up through that, and took a load up to Norway, and from Norway back to New York.
Wow.
Yeah, it was
So
about
you
it.
went around the world.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Well,
Started
one
in-
more question from me.
Go ahead.
What is when you think about back to your time during, I don't know, what you said you started around 1940? You started before the Americans actually got involved in the war, correct?
No, I was in 44. They had
Oh.
it's just before the invasion of Normandy.
Oh, just before the invasion of Normandy. What is the one thing, the one story, the one instance that comes to mind every time you think about your service during World War II?
There's nothing that stands out. Many things after it, but the sinkings that we saw, that
Okay.
you knew.
Still have that image in your head?
Sure. We knew that there were at least 50 or 60 people went down, but we don't know how many were picked up. Of
And
9,000.
they're all your mates too.
Yeah,
All
yeah. Of all the 9,000, there are many that we don't know of. So that count is not accurate, because a lot of the sailors went to Panama and sailed Panamanian ships. Then they didn't keep records.
Oh, so Americans were flying on their ships under another flag.
Yes, that's how bad they needed men. And yeah, that's about it.
I'll be darned. I didn't know that either.
That's awesome.
Thank you so